Hello, boys. Baguette Printer, nice name. How are you, man? Bonjour, bonjour. Right on time to see if the burgers want to brutalize us more than this or not. Hello, Gebretsen. Bonjour, sir. Thanks for the stream. Still working, but I will rewatch later. It should be a slightly shorter stream than usual. I don't have much time today, unfortunately, but yeah, we'll make up for it. In any cases, honestly, I haven't been doing much on the markets and nothing that I'm seeing short term making me particularly interested to trade that. But I will discuss it as we get into the H1 daily updates. So yeah, slightly shorter stream than usual today. Main idea of the stream is to discuss Bitcoin H4 daily updates, which to me are the two clearer places to watch on Bitcoin short term. And then after that, some chat requests depending on the time we have left. And the third part is just through the stream. If you have any questions for me, don't hesitate to ask. If anything that I'm discussing seems confusing, or if you need more explanation, if you have any kind of questions, don't hesitate to ask. This is the main goal of these streams. And especially when we have these kind of conditions where personally I know that the more I do, the more I will make damages to my folio, basically. I'm saying that because, as you can see, we're gonna start with H4. We have no trends respected. We had a very clean H4 downtrend on the way down. A nice attempt to break, a nice break actually, on Sunday, which gave a full retest up to H4 100 MA. It front run it slightly. But if you've been following the system, if you've been following the streams or my content through the years or through the past few weeks, through the past few months, if you've been in the recent streams, you should know that most of the time when we have this kind of structure where we have a break of a strong trend, whether it's to the upside or to the downside, usually the main approach is to expect a gap fill from the trend to 100 MA and ideally to 200 MA and 300 MA, depending on how things develop. But unfortunately for us, as you can see, we've had yet another case of Sunday, Monday strength into lack of momentum and lack of continuation. And the reason I'm saying that this is not necessarily the kind of conditions where I want to be participating is mostly because whether we go on H1 or on H4, we can see that there is no trend defended, basically since the breakdown on Tuesday. And on H4, it's even clearer. We reclaimed the trend, lost it, reclaimed it again, losing it again right now, and closing in 20 minutes, likely going to close below. So basically, not much of a hedge for me to be trading this. We had a very good, as I said, bounce long to play when we broke the H4 downtrend on Sunday, especially considering that we had this window of context where we know that recently we've had some decent early weeks and decent Sundays particularly. So that was a nice way, a nice approach. The retest where we got denied on Tuesday and basically on daily close Monday was extremely clean. It's a level that we've had on our charts for basically since the 1010 crash and basically since October, where it was a very nice support resistance flip into the last very good move all the way up to 115. And obviously, if you're watching Bitcoin, I would assume that the 106.5, 108.5 must be on your charts marked as a clear must break / reclaim, in the sense that I would not be surprised if, doesn't matter what system you use, you would see a H4 / daily close above this October support as a strength indicator and as a strength signal. So unfortunately for me, as I said, not much that I can work with on this chart with that H4 trend disrespected now. There is just, I could just work using the horizontal levels that we've been working with and that we've been watching over the past 10 days, 7 days. Yeah, 7 days. But yeah, it's just brutal conditions, and yeah, I'm gonna get wrecked if I overtrade that. So my main take, and the main um, the main uh, the main scenario that I discussed in my daily updates in the event is basically 102.5, 106.5 chop fest around H4 trend, while the gaps are reducing on H4. For this, obviously, we want to see the lows from yesterday being defended. If they get swept, you want to see a strong reaction back inside the consolidation region. And basically, the two main gaps that I'm seeing on this chart short term are a gap to H4 100 MA on a break of H1 300 MA. It's a little bit cleaner. If I put the H1 chart, you can see that it's been very well respected during this entire bounce. And obviously, to the downside, if we do not just sweep the lows of yesterday and we actually crash through them, instead of chopping in this region, I would not be surprised if we were going to take the lows again and at best chop in this region. So until we are retesting one of those gaps, it's extremely unlikely that I'm going to participate in this price action. I just know my limits. It's frustrating to hold back because the volatility remains interesting in my opinion on lower time frame, but there is just, yeah, I'm just not feeling comfortable trading this. And combined with relatively poor performance over the past month, and therefore confidence not necessarily being at the highs, for me at least, it's just a toxic combination. So I'm just going to accept that I'm gonna get bullied if I do too much in those conditions. I'm setting some alerts in the H4 EMA region and in the lows region. Anything that happens in between, unless I have a spark of confidence showing up if/when one of my alerts trigger, I'm unlikely to just play it. IPR, thank you. Hey, Baguette Dealer, BTC looks like shit. Yeah, it kind of looks. If it doesn't look like shit, at least it looks hard to trade for me at the very least. Maybe some chats from City are printing immensely off of it, but I know my limit. We're gonna get into the daily chart after. IPR. Wait a second. I lost my sound for a minute. IPR, thank you very much for the public stream, and thank you for bringing Monero into my radar from your tweets. Yeah, Monero has been I honestly, I've said it a few times, but this is not a coin that I'm actively trading or even watching more than this. It's a coin. It's one of those very rare coin for me that I'm perfectly fine just holding as an asset, the same way I've been approaching Bitcoin for years now. Obviously, it helps that the chart looks more than good and that it's been respecting the weekly trend quite nicely. But I will say it again, I personally don't think this is a coin you necessarily want to trade too much. But that's just my opinion. But yeah, it moves nicely. Let's see how it continues to develop. We're gonna be discussing the privacy narrative with Zcash after, especially since I got my exit on the H4 trend break yesterday, and that I'm now watching a little bit on the sideline for Zcash. But we're gonna discuss that after discussing the Bitcoin daily chart, which to me remains pretty clean also. And this is where it gets very nasty. But first question from Baguette Printer. Are you playing out in the meantime or holding back completely? I haven't found much that I'm willing to trade. I'm not saying that there are no setups in shitcoin world where I would be interested. But as of now, I don't. And with Zek that got kicked out yesterday, as I just mentioned, I'm not seeing any ads in the moment. I was interested in chasing a gap fill on Plasma yesterday, Monday, sorry. The main argument was that we had H4 100 MA flattening and a fairly wide gap to H4 200 MA. But as you can see, I ended up cutting very rapidly when I noticed that it was just not strong enough to flip H4 100 MA, H4 trend. So it's likely that I just stick to the higher time frame. I think it could very well be building some sort of a wrong bottom in this region. If that's the case, I'm simply going to wait for the daily trend to flatten and to be reclaimed. I think Krillin shared a post about that yesterday on Twitter. Let me check his Twitter page. Yeah, this is a tweet from Krillin yesterday, where basically saying to wait for the daily trend to be flipped. So I'm gonna stick to that. I was interested in it yesterday off of on the back of Bitcoin relative strength, and again because it had such a wide gap to play with. But yeah, so I would say that I have already Plasma PTSD. Personally, I'm fine with it, mostly because I have not touched it since my long from the 0.80 retests in early October, which gave us target one and then got denied, and we died very strongly after that. So I don't necessarily, this is a good example of me not fighting anymore. I think I already discussed it on stream recently, but to me, this represents both of the things I'm doing better now that I used to do, but also what I need to improve on. I'm doing better. I'm not fighting when being wrong, and I'm just accepting my invalidation, which most often tend to be good invalidations. So that's what I'm doing better and what I believe I'm doing great. But how in hell am I not being short on this, especially considering what I just said, when I know that I can trust my invalidations much more? If I know my invalidations are good, when invalidated, that should be enough of an argument to be looking for the other side of the trade. So I don't have PTSD on Plasma, but I would understand if a lot of people have. It's been yet again a very brutal post-launch price action, and I would say even more considering that we are not talking about a meme coin, a Solana meme coin post-listing, post-launch price project. We're talking about something that is supposedly a valid project, right? So yeah, I understand. I genuinely understand the XPL PTSD I can see on my feed when Plasma is mentioned. I also think that eventually this could be a fuel for a decent rally. I'm thinking about something like Pump did after brutal breakdown, brutal post-launch price action. Chop fest at the bottom, flips daily trend support, goes for a nice leg. I'm not saying that it's necessarily what XPL is going to do, but I think it could something that we could see. But yeah. Okay, so let me just wrap it up on the daily chat for BTC, and then we will do some chat requests for the next 30 minutes. Because unfortunately, as I said, I don't have much more time, but I will be doing another stream next week again. I'm gonna try to stream I'm gonna try to do more public streams like this one. I find it very interesting. I feel like we have a very interesting conversation, and as I always say, a good majority of the good setups I took over the past few weeks and months have been off of chat requests from the Aven members or during my public streams. So it's a win-win. Hello Pierre, Zcash trade from last stream went amazing. Yeah, it was a very good one. The H4 trend down to H1 200 EMA retests, aiming for the local high break. That was a pretty decent one. Very happy I managed to catch this one, even if it wasn't big size or whatever. Because as I discussed during the last streams, I was pretty frustrating not being able to play the previous Age for Trends retest when I was AFK at the beginning of the week. So consolidation price, let's call it that way. So for Bitcoin daily, a few things. I still believe that the entire 90K region is the last bull stand. I'm saying last bull stand because I'm considering it as the only place that, as the last place for my Bitcoin, for the rest of my Bitcoin spot exposure to remain valid as an argument. So basically, the closest we are to the invalidation for me, for my Bitcoin spot exposure, for the rest that I have from last year entries, mostly. Therefore, with that being said, it would be the last place for me to be looking for loans, as I would be obviously more interested in gambling close to my invalidations. But as I also said during the last week's streams and in my recent updates, I think I worded quite nicely in a tweet the other day. I am not entirely certain, or I want to execute. Oh, the post was deleted by its author. I don't know why. But yeah, as I said, I see the 90s as the closest place for validation for the rest of my Bitcoin exposure, as I said. But I'm still struggling to know how I want to execute it. I discussed the main scenarios during last week's streams, the main approaches that I could see for me to deploy and to give it a shot. And I haven't been able to decide just yet. The main approaches that I can think about, the first one, which to me is likely to be the most obvious one, would be a consolidation in this region. Daily downtrend catches down with daily 300 MA, and we have the reclaim of both, which would be a very good argument that this was a deviation below daily MMA compression. And even if we don't go for all-time high, I think we very well have a move to daily 100 MA, which would be a very good place to secure some. So first approach would be a daily trend plus daily 300 MA reclaim on a daily basis. The second approach would obviously be the aggressive play, where you wait for some sort of capitulation into the 90s and potentially a retest of the early open, and you buy and pray, basically. And the main argument you have left is that someone else also have this idea and they don't get run over. The hardest part of this approach is sizing and where to place your invalidation, as we could very much take the yearly low just like we could deviate much lower. And obviously the last approach, which is the less likely for me to be executing, would be spreading bid in the 90s and pray. So for now, I'm more likely to go for the approach where we wait for a daily trend and daily 300 MA retest and reclaim, or the last Ave Maria for bulls into the 90s. So I don't know yet. All I know is that if we were to lose this entire region and flip the daily MMA compression resistance, I would simply have no higher time frame bullish arguments left for BT. So that pretty much summarizes my main take on the market short term. And I think it also summarizes very well the situation that I'm in, because as I just said, I don't feel particularly comfortable trading lower time frame price action, and higher time frame I would need to see more developing, whether it's a daily trend X daily 300 MA reclaim, as I just said, or whether it would be a brutal move into the 90s. So I'm a little bit paralyzed on the market right now, and yeah, not doing much. So yeah, it's a bit frustrating, it's a bit boring, and it's even more when we consider how other markets are behaving. Once again, SPX bouncing much stronger than us, once again at H4 300 MA like it did in October. So yeah, I understand more than ever people and I would say maybe just City. Maybe we are biased by what we read on City, but I can understand more than ever people's frustration with the markets right now. Like, it makes sense. It makes sense, and yeah, it has not been the greatest market to trade, to say the least. But yeah, that gives you my overall thoughts, my overall view, whether it's on H4 or daily. If I had to summarize, or at least give you where I have my alerts, and therefore what would be the places where I would be actually interested in trading. Again, from the lows down to yearly open, and to the upside above H4 200 MA and H4 100 MA. And anything in between is likely here to hurt me. I want to say it again. Why am I saying that? Mostly because of H4 trend being disrespected like this, meaning that on lower time frame, I don't have a clear play to chase gut fills anymore. And yeah, you could have an argument right now, as we said at the beginning of stream, of a sweep of yesterday's lows, and if it's defended, you want to see it back inside or back above 103k, 103.5k for it to chop best more. But if we start to crack from through this place further than this, I have a hard time not to see this. Not to see this region raided again. So yeah, let's see. Okay, so let's do some chat requests again. I don't have much time, so I'm not being able to cover potentially all the chat requests you guys have for me, but let's see. So I can see Syrup in the chat. I'm gonna be discussing ZEC, so I'm gonna put ZEC over here. 100k BTC seems a bit like 6k in 2018 or 9k in 2019. Psychological level, where if it's lost, L breaks loose. It's very much how I'm seeing it, not necessarily in terms of the analogies that you just said, in terms of this is the 2018 6k, but one of the, outside of the technical reasons and arguments that I just showed for the 100k region in general, and 90k 100k, outside of it, one of the reasons I'm saying its last bull stand is obviously the confluence with the round logical number, obviously, which doesn't matter what people say, is obviously important psychologically speaking. And outside of this, I didn't show you guys, but we obviously also have the weekly trend plus 100k fight, which adds fuel to the importance of this region in my opinion. And the last bull stand, again, I already discussed it in the previous streams, but could be this kind of below weekly trend deviation, while at the opposite, if it starts to flip resistance, obviously we have we have other things on our hands. We have other things on our hands. When XMR new time high, I don't know, man. As I said, this is not necessarily a coin that I'm particularly glued to the chart on, but as someone that lives in the European Union, I believe that more than ever, having a focus on bags like Monero can be a beneficial thing, or at least mandatory thing for me, at least. In a world where I don't have much conviction in terms of fundamentals, I know that I'm unlikely to ditch my Monero bags no matter the price. But yeah. Okay, so ICP Syrup. ICP, I remember charting it last week with a fight for H4 trend, but I found that wrong. I think I received an alert yesterday saying that it lost H4 trend. Okay, in parallel, while we do the chat request for the next 15 to 20 minutes, keep a close eye on the top right corner. As I said, the 102k fight, in my opinion, is a very crucial one right now. So it's gonna be very important. If you check the drop percentage of Monero compared to BTC and Alt, it's quite remarkable. I mean, it's not very surprising that a coin like Monero, that is not necessarily tradable in as many places, as other crypto, and that actually is used for the best or the worst as a relatively unfazed relationship with the rest of the markets. Could be an argument for it to be a focus, but again, I insist personally, this is not a coin that I'm actively trading whatsoever. But yeah, definitely something. It's definitely a thing. Okay, so I will do Aster, ICP, ZEC, Syrup, and depending on how fast we do this, if I still have a little bit more time, we will do some more. But for now, let's stick to that. I will just rapidly share Bitcoin and Bitcoin H4 and Bitcoin daily charts in the free Telegram section, where I will be sharing also the today's chart requests, as I always do during public streams. So if you want to have access to the charts, don't hesitate to join this channel. I mostly just use it to reshare Twitter updates and to share charts that we cover during chart request on stream. But yeah. Okay, so let's start with ICP. Okay, I remember charting this earlier this week or last week. I think it was last Friday. I did not take that, but we can see that H4 trend lost. Okay, so when I'm seeing something that looks like it, remember what I said for Bitcoin at the beginning of the stream? I mentioned that when we have a break or a reclaim of H4 trend after a strong H4 trend, the main argument is to aim for a gap fill to 100 EMA and 200 EMA. So obviously in that case, that gives us basically this. We can see the strong H4 trend to the upside. A first initial sign of weakness, if you ever watch a chart like this. So initially a very strong, a very good signal of strong trend is how the trend is retested. In the sense that if you have a trend where 13 EMA is very strong and we don't get full trend retest, it's usually a very good argument of a strong trend. And therefore, when 13 EMA starts to crack, obviously you can do the 1 minus I just said, and therefore can be seen as the signal of weakness. So strong H4 trend, 13 EMA starts to crack, H4 trend lost, retested, flip resistance. Which means that if you have a chart that looks like this at this point, the main approach should be H4, 100 EMA, 200 EMA as potential region must hold / downside target wherever it is, and obviously H4 trend as a must break / reclaim / flip support. You get the point. And as long as it's in between, mostly expect chop fest / compression. So usually when I see a chart like this, if I missed the break of the trend, and therefore if the compression has already played out, I usually get out, back off, set some alerts above H4 trend and in the 100 EMA, 200 EMA region. And basically I wait to see which side the compression resolves. But if you are in a case where you have a first trend break like this, I believe that you have an argument to play the retrace or the bounce, depending on the direction of the trend before, obviously. Particularly if the gaps to 100 EMA and 200 EMA are big, which means that this is, and for those who might be in the Haven or have been in the Haven or watch my content for some time, this is what I usually refer to as gap fill setups. And usually the first condition is the prior trend to be broken and flip resistance. And the second condition is to have wide gaps to 100 EMA and 200 EMA. Obviously, if the gaps are too small, it's, again, obviously vastly less interested to chase, in which case you just let the compression unfold, which can be a little bit of an example on ZEC right now, for example. I could be interested in trying to long H4 100 EMA, but my main target would be H4 trend, which is a relatively small gap to chase, so not necessarily interested. But outside of this full yapping, yeah, for me, when I'm watching a chart like this, I'm gonna put some alerts above H4 trend. I will go on H1 to see where this looks a lot like something that's going to compress on H1, by the way. But I will put some alerts above H4 trends and in the H4 100 MA, H4 200 MA region. And until either of the two alerts are triggered, I usually let it develop. I will explain a little bit more what I just said here. Often best, often both is best when I'm saying either wait for H4 trend reclaim or H4 100 MA, 200 MA retest. What I'm trying to say here is that a reclaim here would be less appealing to me than here, simply in terms of the quality of the setup and the quality of the invalidation. Because let's imagine we reclaim H4 trend here, and I want to long the H4 trend reclaim. I'm gonna have to have my invalidation in between, like a very close to H4 100 MA, 200 MA. So a little bit painful if you get invalidated, as it could very much go for the retest and compress some more. While if we have a much tighter compression and the H4 trend happens when 100 MA and 200 MA has caught up with the H4 trends, you can have your invalidation below the confluence of H4 trend and H4 100 MA, 200 MA, making, to me at least, the invalidation a much better one to trust and to focus on. And it makes sense, again, if you remember what are the main phases of my system. The system is a repeat of the cycle of EMA compression into trends, into gap fills, and then repeat. So obviously, if we have gap fills now, the tighter the compression, the better the setup to take after, in my opinion. Let's say you played the gap fill, how would you compound? I would compound on any H4 trend retests with at least, okay, I would compound on any H4 trend retests, and I would likely get out prematurely on any kind of close above H4 trend. And you can dive into H1 and see how we behave around H1 200 MA. As if H1 200 MA is rapidly reclaimed here, I think we could see some sort of H1 compression, in which case less appealing to be in a position. So basically just focus on the H4 trend as long as it works. The same way that you probably would have longed any H4 trend retest on the way up. We just Alt E. That's the same argument. So focus on the trend until it doesn't work anymore, basically. But again, back at Twitter, as I said when I opened the chart, the tighter the compression, the smaller the distance between trend and 100 MA, the less appealing it is to look for a fresh position and or compound, basically, as you're gonna be looking for less rewards, basically. But usually when I have this kind of charts, unless I catch the initial first bearish retest, I don't overdo it. Let's keep an eye on the news feed also. Obviously, as we have still negotiation for the US government shutdown and reopening. Could be, even if the longer it takes, I believe the less impact it's gonna have, it's likely to be the main volatility fuel short term, I would say. So let's keep an eye on it. Okay, so that's for ICP. Summary of ICP, in my opinion, is you either wait for a retest of the 4.9 up to 5.2 region, and it's a key must hold, or you simply monitor it for trend development and you wait for it to be reclaimed and flipped. Meanwhile, Bitcoin could be already filling the gaps down to low 100K. Next one, let's do Syrup. I've seen it on my charts. Very flat charts, price-wise, EMMA-wise. We have all the main moving averages flat, whether it's the daily trend, 100 MA, so obviously trendless, which is not necessarily the easiest place to play, not without being the easiest place. Usually if I'm opening a chart like this, as someone that is looking for trends, I tend to disregard. I'm not saying that this entire place cannot be just a place where these projects are just chop and hold, and if you have the balls to just buy and wait, why not? But if, like me, what you're mainly chasing is trendy behavior, you have none of it on this chart. So I would say that likely the main approach to have is likely to just draw a range, set alerts above, set alerts below, and wait for it to unfold. A bullish development for something like this short term would be to see daily trend being defended and grinding to the range high region, as it would be encouraging to see it break out. But overall, for me, if I'm opening a chart and it's fully flat like this, I just move on to the next one, looking for a place where we have some trendy behavior, sorry. So yeah, but it's in my watch list. It's not something that I traded a lot, I believe. I think I took a few scalps earlier this year when it was ramping up, but I don't think I have touched it or traded it ever since. It's in my watch list, so I presume that it's a coin that some people watch, considering that majority of my watch list is mostly just chart requests. But yeah, no idea. If it behaves like a range and looks like a range, then it's a range. So yeah, start defending daily trend and compress between daily trend and must break, and you have an argument for some bullishness. Otherwise, I would not be surprised if we just turbo chop fast around it, particularly while Bitcoin remains such a cute coin. So no stronger argument than this for Syrup ZZZ 2812 if you're still in the chat. Considering the altcoin, the majority of the altcoins state right now, I would say that compared to a vast majority of shitcoins, it looks decent in the sense that it's not dead and has not retraced down to the 10-10 week, which makes sense as he would put it to zero basically. But this looks infinitely better than something like Solana, for example, which looks like death to me, to be honest. Flip daily trend still acting as resistance, previous support, flip resistance. Yeah. Okay. Let's not spend too much time bashing Sol while the rest of the market is shit also anyway. I'm gonna do Zcash real quick because I already discussed it. It reminds me of when we covered ZEC mid-October. When we discussed the deck mid-October, you can see it's still on the chart actually. The main idea was must hold H4 100 MA, must reclaim H4 trend. If I get both, I'm willing to long. If we start losing H4 100 MA, I will prepare myself for a gap fill to 200 MA, which would be a long. And it's pretty much the same story here, as you can see. H4 100 MA must hold. Otherwise, I think we fill the gaps to H4 200 MA, and H4 trend must reclaim. And it's pretty much what I just discussed in my dedicated thread for Zcash in the Haven. As you can see, letting this H4 100 MA fight happen, lose H4 100 MA, aim to longer H4 200 MA, retest lower, hold H4 trend. I did a typo. Hold H4 100 MA and reclaim H4 trend, long aiming for retest of the highs, exactly like we did in the 250 region, and do nothing in between. The main argument I have not to play this more aggressively is something that I just discussed for ICP. On ICP, I told you that there was an argument for ICP to cool off on H4, which was H4 13 EMA. H4 13 EMA being broken while it's been defended all the way up. Well, on Zcash, and it's also something we discussed on stream recently, you can see daily 13 EMA. Daily 13 EMA has been defended on Zcash since $50, and it's now lost, which again doesn't necessarily mean that it's the end of the world for Zcash and it's gonna die, but it could be seen as an argument for some cool off and for Zcash to consolidate a little bit while daily trend catches up, potentially an H4 200 EMA retest, as I just said. Counter argument for that is Zcash being very strong rapidly and getting back above 13 EMA very rapidly. But I have to be a little bit more cautious, and because again, when 13 EMA starts to crack on any trend that I'm following, especially if it's been very strongly defended before, I have to take this as a signal to be cautious. Maybe I'm a little bit biased also by the fact that, as I said at the beginning of the stream and through the stream, I don't necessarily want to participate much on the Bitcoin chart neither. So maybe I am maybe I'm not going to be able to say that in English, but maybe I'm looking for justification to do nothing. But I believe that the approach of letting this develop and wait a little bit is a good one. The same way we did in the 250 region. I won't blink twice, giving the exact same kind of setup a go if it manages to reclaim H4 trend and defend H4 100 MA. Remember what I said for ICP? On ICP, I said that the tighter the compression between trend and 100 MA, 200 MA, the better the setup to take after, because you can have a better invalidation with a confluence of 100 MA plus trend. It's the exact same idea on ZEC here. You can see it a little bit also with the setup I took on the 250 reclaim. Was a very good one for me because we had the confluence of horizontal level plus 100 MA plus trend. So if it failed, I wouldn't have blinked twice on my invalidation. This is the exact same argument here. If we have some sort of a compression between the two and a reclaim, I will have a very good invalidation. So I'm fine with it. I'm fine letting it develop a little bit. And hope in parallel that Bitcoin stops being a cunt. And maybe I'm wrong. There is an argument for Bitcoin where this is not the place where we chop vests, and this is the place where we chop vests, a much bigger one, much more brutal one in my opinion in terms of sentiment swings. I would expect if we were to chop vests between 100k and 107k for a couple of weeks, I think City is going to implode. I genuinely think that City is going to implode if we were to do something like this. I would expect City to become extremely toxic and chaotic if that was to happen. But we see. If I summarize very rapidly, ICP that we just discussed, I believe you are good to wait for H4 trend or H4 100 MA, 200 MA retests. Syrup looks better than most shitcoins because it's very stable, but at least for me, as someone that trade trends, it doesn't have yet what it needs for me to be interesting, in the sense that it's very flat on most time frames. And ZEC, H4 100 MA must hold, H4 trend must reclaim. Do nothing in between. Pierre Crypto, are you monitoring NIR? Any thoughts on it? I'm gonna do Aster real quick. Then I do NIR to answer your question, Alex, and then I will have to shut the stream off. But let's do Aster first. I'm a little bit mad about Aster because I caught an entry, a very nice entry post CZ by retrace that I ended up holding in on this retest over here. I lacked conviction mostly. The initial thesis of longing this region initially was there was nothing technical about it. That was simply, I cannot believe in a world where CZ ego is not big enough for him to defend the place he publicly said about, basically. So the idea was long if we retrace down to the place where CZ share belonged, and pray that the man wants to show he has some balls, basically. But beside that, it's gonna be a very quick one because I covered it on stream last week in the Haven. I think it's even clearer now than it was when I covered it at the end of last week. I think you want to see this place defended, the one we are retesting now, which is basically 110 down to 108. If you defend this, I think you have an argument, and Bitcoin doesn't die, obviously, yada yada yada, but this goes without saying. I believe that you have an argument to fill this gap, and if you get the opportunity, I think you want to front run the post CZ buy announcement highs, as I would not be surprised if this gets retested. People who FOMO'd on the CZ tweet will use the opportunity to de-risk a little bit on their FOMO Aster CZ tweet buys. So if you were to trade, I believe you want to front run that target. And eventually the end target for me would be a H4 300 MA retest. While at the opposite, if this box fails to flip support, so basically if H4 trend is not defended, I think we just continue to chop fast like this, and CZ will postpone the Aster pump for later. So it's pretty much what I shared on the Haven stream from last Friday, if I'm not mistaken. Well, you can see it on red over here. Old H4 trend equals potential retest of CZ by reaction highs. So that's the one I just discussed. Flip H4 200 MA support. So that's what it's failing to do, but trying at least. Check Aster on different exchanges. 200 MA is so different. You're probably extremely correct. And maybe it's indeed very different. Okay, it's indeed much higher. I don't think it changes much of the arguments. In the sense that in any cases, the argument is for H4 trend to be defended and this kind of compression. But 100% indeed, it shows a little bit more why this place is a clear one to fight for. But yeah, it's because Aster spot came much later on Binance, if I'm not mistaken. Or is it like... it's pretty much the same story for the Bybit chart. Okay, so in places that has a lot of price history, like CoinEx, you have the same H4 200 EMA. Otherwise, it's different. Okay, need to keep this in mind. Need to keep this in mind. But usually I like to focus on the charts where I have the most price action to work with. Sorry. Maybe it's a mistake. But yeah, I've been mostly using this chart for Aster because it's the one with the most price history I found on TradingView. But in any cases, as you can see, this remained a clear must break. This is a must hold. I would just say H4 trend. So in terms of potential setups, I guess if you're willing to play a little bit aggressively, you have this kind of setup over here. The main thing I'm not a fan of, and you probably see it straight away if you're familiar to the system and everything that I just discussed, is the proximity with H4 100 MA. I believe it sucks because I would not be surprised if this could be swept into a bounce. But at the same time, as I said, if this fails, this compression fails, to me, we are going for this kind of compression more than anything. So I guess it makes the invalidation less shitty. And otherwise, you can play the game of longing a breakout slash a breakout play. Probably those kind of setups. Okay. I'm gonna put some alerts over here. I'm likely more to play the second setup than the first one. Mostly because, as I said, I'm not necessarily interested in positioning myself on most things right now. I can recognize when the market is going to bully me, so I try not to be bullied. Been bullied too much in the past. And finally, NIR, and then unfortunately I will already have to shut the stream off. As I said, slightly shorter stream today. But again, I should be streaming again next week. And as I said at the beginning of the stream, I'm gonna try to be at least do two public streams per month. And ideally, I would want to do more than that, but we will see. NIR, I discussed it last week on stream also, if I'm not mistaken. I think I covered it in my chat request in the Haven last Friday, if I'm not mistaken. We did a lot of chat requests lately in the Haven. We covered a lot of things. NIR. Okay, but I think I did more than this for NIR, if I'm not mistaken. Chat requests. NIR. Yeah, I had a few chats. Okay, so one of the first things we were watching was the H1 charts initially. But yeah, we moved a lot. We retested. It never came for the H1 trend retest. I'm always very uncomfortable when people are requesting near, because it's printed in my brain that when this thing moves, we are closer to the end than anything else, but it doesn't have to be true forever. But yeah. And I think the main idea on the daily chat was something like this: must break, so obviously it's a must hold. Not the biggest fan of this kind of charts. I would have found it extremely sexier if it managed to hold above this daily MMA. The fact that it blasted through it once again makes it vastly less sexy to me. You could have an argument of this daily trend retest right now, but we don't know yet if we have a daily trend to work with. So not seeing much of interest. Let's see a little bit more higher time frames. I mean, again, when you compare it to some other alts, I guess we can say it looks half decent. But in current market conditions, half decent means it's not just dead. So it's not much of a it's not much of a good argument. I'm trying to think of a potential setup here, but I can think the main thing I can see is obviously that H for 200 EMA, 200 EMA, 100 EMA, sorry, that's in confluence with a key horizontal level. So ideally, you would want to see this retest, defended if retested with potential H4 compression like this. Otherwise, I believe you have an equally good argument of chasing along if you have a H4 trend plus this horizontal level reclaim, which in my opinion would require Bitcoin to hold now and bounce and show some life. So yeah, not necessarily the thing I'm the most interested in, but I guess you could have an argument for these attempts. Some things like this, for example, like H4 trend lost for now, failed to flip daily EMA MA. Too soon to talk about daily trends. Equals focus more on H4, and on H4 200 EMA X H4 100 EMA confluence with H4 support resistance flip at 2.3 up to 2.4, 2.3, 2.4 equals must hold. Main struggle with this is where to place SL, obviously, but would be a good last bull stand if you want to give it a shot, and or wait for H4 trend X 2.6, 2.7, yeah, 2.6, 2.7 reclaim. In any cases, if retests of localize, pay yourself. Yeah, probably something like this, Alex. So I don't think I would be willing to play in this in right now in this region. But if you get a retest of H4 200 EMA and H4 100 EMA, I think it's a good enough argument for bulls to show up and therefore be a place to long. And otherwise, a clean H4 trend reclaim. Reminds me a little bit of what we just discussed for ICP, where you either wait and, no, not either, and or wait for H4 200 EMA 100 EMA gap fill or trend and or trend reclaim. But I would say EMA wise, it looks better on ICP than NIR. But NIR has a better confluence for the region where we have H4 200 EMA and H4 100 EMA. Should be better. Okay, sorry. I don't know for how long I've been muted, but yeah, I was saying that I believe that yeah, muted. Sorry. That's I bumped into my mic and I need to change the wire of my mic. It's very sensitive every time I move the desk. I was talking in the void, but I was saying that Litecoin looked very interesting to me when it was doing these three tests on Monday, sorry, because it had the opportunity to do a classical support resistance flip plus H4 trend and join the Dino coins and pump basically, but I kind of feel like it missed that opportunity. I do think that it's at a crucial place to defend and hold over here, obviously H4 100 MA, but I'm less interested in playing it than I was at the beginning of the week. So it was not in the chat request, but I don't know if some of you guys are watching Litecoin. This is pretty much the main thing that I was watching. We have a good SPX bounce, not the strongest, but at least it's bouncing. Is it going to help Bitcoin defend the 102k region / reclaim the yesterday's lows or not? We'll see. Probably still a good focus to have. I do think that now this is a must reclaim, but I think I can adjust my boxes a little bit like this. And maybe, as I said through the stream, maybe this is our new range. I don't know. We'll see. I have 2 more minutes if you have a chat request on the go that you want me to do. Otherwise, that will be the end of the stream. I wanted to take a quick look at ETH BTC. Okay, no major changes on ETH BTC. I remain mostly uninterested as long as it's below daily trends. Very, very, very good focus to have if you are interested in ETH. Just focus on the ETH BTC daily trend. If Ethereum is above if BTC is above daily trend, you can focus on longing ETH over Bitcoin. As long as it's below, just stick to Orange Coin. Quickly, would you have played curve compression at 100 MA to 200 MA? Without watching the charts, I'm going to tell you no, because curve is a blacklisted coin in my book for quite some time. But I'm gonna watch it rapidly for you if you want. Let me check how it looked like. On H4, I would assume. On H4. It looked very promising, for sure. And you know what? It reminds me of the last extremely clean H4 EMA compression that we played and took on stream with you guys. It was a few weeks ago. It was on AVNT. This was a setup we planned and took during a public stream, and it was, in my opinion, it was the last that I have in mind, the last extremely clean display of the system. Something that used to happen, something that we used to have on most alt charts a few years ago, I would say. With H4 100 MA, H4 trend compression into spike gap fill to 200 MA. So kinda reminds me of this structure, but vastly less interesting in the sense of vastly smaller gaps to chase. I would have probably not played it. The main arguments for me not to play this would have been: 1, curve, and I don't trade curve. 2, I would have had a struggle to long below this horizontal level, which has been a very clean one. And finally, because the gap to chase 10%, okay, maybe it would have been good enough. No, yeah, the two main arguments would have been curve being historically a current coin, and two, the proximity with this resistance. But it was on paper still a very decent one. Still a very decent one. It kind of reminds me of what we discussed on ICP. On ICP earlier, I said that if you catch the first trend retest after a trend is broken, you have a good and the gaps are big, you have a good argument to chase the gap fills. In that case, if you caught a long year, I believe it was a decent one to stick to, with invalidation below H4 trend and target H4 200 EMA, wherever it is. Vastly less here, for example, but too easy to tell in Insight Baguette Printer, because now I can see it played out nicely and it's easy to find ghost arguments that I would have had supposedly when it happened. The more likely scenario would have been that I watched it and told myself it's curve, I don't want to trade it. Basically. I didn't because I was worried about the support resistance level. Yeah, I get that, to be honest. I get that. This is a very clean daily trend on curve, once again. It had a couple of deviations, but overall, very clean. Let's see if those retests were H4 200 EMA bearish retests or not. If that's the case, that will be a very good example for me for a last word before shutting the stream off. Almost, not perfectly. What I wanted to highlight with this is that if you watch the stream often, if you've been in the Haven, if you've been a follower on Twitter for quite some time, you should know that when I'm watching a trend, whether it's to the upside, to the downside, or any time frame, and I'm waiting for a trend break, I will consider the trend to be broken with two conditions, which is, in that case, daily trend broken / flipped, for me would require two conditions. One, that the daily is above daily trend, obviously, and two, that H4 200 EMA is flipped support. This second condition is, I believe, a good way to avoid fake outs and fade trend reclaims, meaning that you've just had a daily close above daily trend, you're a little bit hesitant to immediately play the daily trend retest after that. Usually being a little bit patient, seeing if H4 200 EMA is defended or not is a good argument. We can see that we've had quite a few attempts of breaking through H4 200 EMA. You come back the day after, you see that H4 200 EMA is showing no kind of defense, get the fuck out. And it's a good way to avoid that. Another very good argument of that was ETH BTC daily downtrend, basically since 2022. It had a lot of attempts to break through daily downtrends, and every time basically it was rapidly followed by either just a Pico bearish retest of H4 200 EMA, either we break through H4 200 EMA and 2 hours later it's already broken. At the opposite, a significant break through H4 200 EMA. So just keep this in mind if you're playing with trends and you want a potential confirmation of the trend you're focused on is lost / broken, whatever, you can use that. On ZEC, for example, for me to cut the rest of my position, the conditions were H4 close below H4 trend and H1 200 EMA lost, because with these two conditions, it meant that the H4 trend was finally broken and that it was not just a deviation. Like this compounding retest was triggered despite closing below H4 200 EMA, H4 trend, sorry, because H1 200 EMA was intact. So this is what this small rule tried to help with. When you have a close below the trend, but because it's just imaginary lines, it doesn't have to be Pico precise. Focusing on the -1 time frame 200 EMA is a good good confirmation. And obviously what I just said applies on all time frames, in the sense that I just used the example of the daily trend. But if you're focused on H4 trend, that would be H4 above H4 trend and H1 200 EMA broken, etc., etc. All right, that is it for today's stream. Yeah, keep an eye on SPX developments. If it manages to flip this support, keep an eye on news feed regarding the US shutdown. On Bitcoin, all highs on H4 trend, if it's still disrespected or if it starts flipping resistance. All eyes on the lows, obviously. And H4 100 EMA, 200 EMA as the key place to break. Strong confluence with October reports. And outside of that, that's pretty much it. It's pretty much it for today's chat requests and for today's stream. Ended up streaming a little bit more than initially planned, but that's good. Next stream should be at least in 2 weeks, ideally next week. But in any cases, I will keep you guys updated, obviously, and I will tell on Twitter when is the next time I'm going live. And I hope that you learned a few things, and don't hesitate to give me feedback on Twitter if you find anything that I could improve or whatever. And yeah, I will see you all